Have you ever been held captive so strangers could poke, tease, and watch your every move? I haven't, but if zoo animals could talk, they would not say the same. This semester, I've been developing a research paper over the past few weeks about if sanctuaries or zoos are the better environment for animals. So I've done a lot of research over this topic, and I've looked at several sources. So today, I really just want to bring awareness to the negative effects that big species or that zoos have on big species. And I hope through signing petitions and stop funding zoos and more ways that I'll talk about later, I just really hope that we can get to the point where we can help take care of these large animals in zoos. So I know most of us, find it really cool to go see these animals in person, zoos, polar bears, apes, all these cool big animals in the zoos. And I know I used to, but whenever I found out, honestly, the horrors that these animals face, I just felt guilty for supporting zoos and them having these animals in captivity. So I first would just like to acknowledge that zoos do some good. They do well with smaller animals and injured animals, but honestly, the good does not outweigh the bad, and we can't just overlook how they treat their large animals just because they do good in other areas. So that actually leads me to my first point, which is that sanctuaries are the most beneficial environment for animals. And so I'm going to tell you a story, the story of Joa the elephant, who lived in a Sri Lanka zoo. He was taken out of the wild and taken to a zoo very early on, and he only allowed one person to handle him, and when that person retired, he was shackled at the feet and put into a small enclosure away from the public eye. He then suffered arthritis from not being able to walk around, scabs from not being bathed and not having a pond so he can bathe himself, and he had so much stress. His head was constantly shaking back and forth, and like I said, he was just very aggressive. So once authorities finally heard word about this, they took him out of that and placed him in a sanctuary, and the sanctuary worked with him for about 3 to 4 months, and they fully rehabilitated him. He had 50 acres to roam, and he was joined back in with a big herd, and he was just very friendly. So that just proves that sanctuaries have the resources to help these animals. So this leads me to the second point of why zoos are so bad, is the zoos simply just don't have the room. The Nashville Zoo website says that they have a 13,000 square foot enclosure for elephants whenever they have their elephants, and that's not even half an acre. And elephants normally roam about 30 to 50 miles per day, so for their enclosure to be that small, you can see that they're just not, getting to walk around like they are. So I actually have a picture of Joa in the at the zoo, not the sanctuary, at the zoo, and you can see you can't really tell it well on here, but he has chains around his feet down here, and you can see all the thick scabs from him not being able to get a bath, but you'll be able to see that better at school in person. So luckily for Joa, he was able to move out of the zoo, but what happens to those animals that don't get that? So that leads me to my next point, and I'm going to talk about the mental issues that these animals face in zoos. So Emma Maris wrote an article about Are Zoos Worth the Moral Cost? And she just talks about several different issues like animals escaping their habitats and stuff like that. But I'm going to talk about the issues of all the medications that the animals are on. So she talks about Gus, who is a polar bear who has OCD and swims endless circles in his swimming pool. And he actually developed that from his enclosure being too small, and they give him Prozac to relax him. It talks about a female gorilla who doesn't want to mate, and they give her Prozac to relax. And it talks about a different zoo who gives zebras and wildebeest antipsychotics to calm them down. So you might have noticed that I mentioned the drug Prozac a few times, and I just want to talk about this drug for a second because it's a very common drug that zoos give their animals. So some of the symptoms are rashes, hives, swelling of the face, tongue, throat, neck. It also can have them develop anxiety, and then it has all the basic side effects like loss of appetite, nausea, etc. So instead of zoos taking responsibility for the stress that they induce on these animals, they just give them drugs to kind of relax them. And Joa's story, we see what a positive impact that if you actually, take time to train the animal, what what the animal can turn into. But unfortunately, zoos don't have the resources, they don't have the time, and they honestly just don't want to put the effort in like sanctuaries do. And I would just like to add that even if, larger animals do get through their stay, they actually still suffer quite a lot. According to Connect Us, who made an article called The 16 Disadvantages and Advantages of Zoos. And that's basically just an unbiased website, and they post about different topics from different viewpoints. It talks about how orcas can live for almost 100 years in the wild versus only 20 in zoos or aquariums, which are basically zoos for, ocean animals and stuff. And it also talks about how elephants can live 70 years in the wild versus 17 in the zoos. So that just furthers the point that, zoos just have such a negative impact on these animals all around, specifically the large animals. So unfortunately, you might be asking, like, if they're doing all these things wrong, like, why isn't something done? And it's because, unfortunately, our politicians aren't aware of how much room these animals truly need. So even though it's not morally right, it's really not breaking any laws, which is why we should write to our local politicians and let them know about what these animals are going through. If enough people give them educated reasonings onto why this is an issue, we could help these animals. You can also just let your zoos know about other animals and, what these other zoos did for this animal to benefit them. You can just let them know. You can also donate to local charities and stuff to help raise awareness. But personally, I think you should just let people know. Let your friends and family know how bad zoos are for these large animals, and just get the word around. That way we can stop funding these large zoos. So today, I hope that I may have changed your viewpoint by highlighting some of these, awful issues that these large animals go through. Joa was able to make a full recovery once he was out of a zoo, and we can help the many other animals that are still in zoos that are facing anxiety, depression, arthritis, and there's a lot of issues that these animals face, infertility. The list goes on and on. So as I leave y'all today, I really just ask that y'all consider not supporting these zoos that mistreat their large animals. Thank you.